Excuse me, Yongsangu Street.
I'm heading toward Mapogu. Does this cab lead to Yongsan-gu Street?
Yes, it does, but this cab is reserved.
Mino, the car.
Fine, get in, you ride in silence, and you owe me a conversation, Agassi.
The aroma of freshly ground coffee and cinnamon pastries provided a fleeting illusion of normal life inside the Moonlight Brew Cafe. 2 days had passed since the shared cab ride. She was behind the counter, humming softly, when the entrance bell chimed. The gentle ambient noise dissolved instantly into absolute stillness. Jin-suk moved through the doorway. He chose a corner table. Zuri approached, pushing down the surge of panic. "What can I get you today?" Zuri asked, her voice steady. He finished the cup deliberately. Then, without a word, Jin-suk rose. He made no move toward payment. Every instinct screamed at Zuri to let him go. But this was her parents' legacy. "Excuse me," Zuri called out, her voice cutting through the silence. Jin-suk froze. Minho shifted instantly. Jin-suk raised his palm, and the guard stopped. Everyone stopped. "You haven't settled your bill," Zuri stated. The silence was suffocating. Jin-suk rotated fully, examining her with renewed interest. "Do you understand who I am?" he asked slowly, a warning disguised as a question. "Someone who owes 5,001, Zuri said, her pulse thundering. "You've got impressive courage, Miss Okoye." "And you have an outstanding balance," Zuri replied. "Consider it paid," Jin-suk said. He turned and departed. The bell chimed once, final. Zuri gripped the counter. Her stepfather's voice sliced through the quiet. "You just declared war on the devil himself. Do you have any idea what you've just done?" The silence of the early morning was broken only by the sound of Zuri's trembling footsteps approaching the cafe. The rain had washed the streets clean, but the sense of dread Jin-suk had imprinted on her 2 days prior was suffocating. She pushed open the door to the Moonlight Brew and froze. The space was not just empty, it was violated. This was not the result of a random break-in. This was methodical, surgical malice. Tables, chairs, the ancient copper espresso machine, the antique clock her mother treasured gone. Every fixture, every piece of sentimental property had been meticulously removed. Only bare floors and empty walls remained, turning the once vibrant heart of her parents' dream into a mausoleum. Zuri's stepfather, already there, emerged from the back, screaming, "This is your doing! You embarrassed the boss! He said he'd strip us bare!" Zuri walked through the hollow space like a ghost, her shock hardening into disbelief. The sight of the empty walls felt like a corporate execution, a powerful entity seizing a small American stake on foreign ground. The shock curdled into disgust when the smell hit her. Putrid, overwhelming, unforgiving. The pastries she'd prepared for the morning rush, the milk, the fresh fruit all destroyed, left to rot in the intentionally damaged refrigerator. This deliberate annihilation of her business viability proved Jin-suk's act was not about 5,001. It was about total submission. Her eyes fell on a note left haphazardly tacked to a pipe where the espresso machine used to stand. It wasn't signed by Jin-suk. It was a formal-looking document, printed in complex Korean, but stamped with a recognizable Lee Syndicate seal. She pulled the document down, her fingers shaking as she deciphered the main terms. It was a lien and seizure order based on a fabricated, outstanding commercial debt. The entire destruction was veiled in the cold, ruthless language of corporate law, making the malice all the more chilling and controversial. Jin-suk hadn't used brute force. He had weaponized bureaucracy to legally steal her American dream, proving his power extended far beyond the streets. Zuri crumpled the paper, the sound echoing loudly in the immense space. The sense of vulnerability was absolute, but the fear was instantly consumed by a blinding, white-hot, crystalline rage. She would not be evicted from her life by a paper tiger in a tailored suit. She realized her confrontation wasn't just against a man. It was against a syndicate that believed it owned the law itself. She began scooping every spoiled item into a canvas bag, moving with mechanical fury. This trash, this decay, was evidence of his crime. She looked up at the towering silhouette of the Lee Tower, piercing the skyline like a blade. "Fine. He plays corporate raider? I'll bring the trash to his glass castle." Her focus narrowed. She was done with principles. She was ready for war. Zuri was beyond trembling. She was operating on pure, feral instinct. Clutching the canvas bag heavy with decay, she stormed out of the ruined cafe. She crossed traffic toward the formidable Lee Tower, her target Jin-suk piercing the skyline like a blade of ice. She dismissed security personnel shouting warnings with animalistic focus. When one guard, a massive man in a suit, attempted physical restraint near the entrance, Zuri sidestepped his reach, used the momentum of his lunge, and twisted his forearm sharply, sending him stumbling backward. She ducked beneath a second guard and burst through the revolving doors. The elevator ride was swift. Her reflection in the polished steel showed a woman utterly consumed by rage, ready to burn the whole world down. She entered the penthouse office, a hushed expanse of glass and chrome. Jin-suk sat behind his immense desk, immaculate, studying documents. He didn't look up, an act of deliberate, calculated disrespect. Do you always annihilate what refuses to submit? Zuri's voice cut through the silence like broken glass. He looked up slowly, deliberately. His expression was unreadable, but in his eyes was satisfaction. He'd been waiting for this fire. You fought my security, Jin-suk stated, calmly acknowledging the chaos she'd caused. They stood in my path, Zuri muttered, advancing. Jin-suk rose slowly, fluidly, moving like a predator. You could have called and begged for mercy. It would have saved you this trip. I'm not here to grovel, Zuri replied. Jin-suk stopped just close enough to invade her space. Then explain your presence. To return your gift, Zuri said. She dropped the heavy canvas bag at his feet with a thunderous thud. Then she performed the ultimate act of disrespect. She overturned the bag. Decay and fermentation and rot cascaded over his pristine desk, over his expensive papers, over his perfect charcoal suit. The overwhelming, suffocating odor of spoiled produce saturated the temperature-controlled room. Jin-suk's reaction was instantaneous. His hands clenched into fists at his sides with such force that his knuckles turned white. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. Fury, pure and concentrated, radiated off him like heat. He advanced until mere inches separated them. Do you have any idea what you've just done? He asked, his voice low and dangerous, dripping with power. You need to take a dose of your medicine, Zuri retorted, her voice shaking but holding firm. Taste it and inhale it. Something flickered in his eyes, respect, rage, and a terrifying hunger. The air between them crackled with violence. The doors exploded inward. Guards flooded in, weapons partially drawn. On your command, boss, a guard, Jae-sun, asked urgently. Jin-suk never broke his gaze from Zuri. Confine her in my quarters, he said. Each word deliberate, a command meant to strip her of her defiance. The reality of his word hit Zuri like a physical blow. She retreated a step, her breath hitching. You wouldn't dare. Try me, Jin-suk said, moving closer. Before anyone could take another step, a sharp, rhythmic sound interrupted the scene. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from the doorway. Madame Lee had arrived. The sound of Madame Lee's cane, sharp and rhythmic, silenced the penthouse more effectively than Jin-suk's command. The guards, weapons partially drawn, froze mid-step, instantly recognizing the ultimate authority. Madame Lee, clad in gray silk with diamonds glittering at her throat, surveyed the scene. The stench of decay, the ruined desk, the armed men, and at the center, the furious, soaked confrontation between her grandson and a young woman in a hoodie. She directed a gaze of profound disappointment at Jin-suk. You've built an empire on calculated intimidation, Jin-suk, she stated, her voice quiet but piercing. Look at yourself now, outwitted by a mere barista who used rotting fruit as her weapon. Jin-suk's jaw tightened, showing a rare moment of exposed frustration and subservience. Madame Lee turned her full attention to Zuri. So, this is the one who caused this chaos. She assessed Zuri, noting her fierce eyes and the remnants of glitter beneath her hoodie, the contrast between defiance and her profession. What do they call you, child? Park Tsuri Okoye. Lovely. I never knew Africans possessed this kind of fire, Madame Lee noted, her tone both complimentary and controversial, emphasizing Zuri's uniqueness within the soul power structure. She lifted her cane, pointing it directly at Zuri, delivering the decree with absolute finality. My grandson requires someone who refuses to kneel to gain the full syndicate approval. A wife who is a strength, not a convenience. You have proven yourself that strength. You will become his wife. Zuri's mind seized up. I'm not marrying anyone, she cried, the horror of being bargained for, like a political asset, overriding her rage. I traded my coffee bill for a beating, not my life. Jin-suk finally spoke, his voice tight. Grandmother, Madame Lee silenced him with a fraction of a movement. She turned back to Zuri, her thin lips curving into a smile that promised absolute ruin. You already married chaos, dear. This is merely documentation. she delivered the final, crushing offer. Marry him, and you get every piece of your parents' furniture back. Every single fixture, all the assets stolen under that seizure notice. You reclaim your legacy. Zuri stared at the price. Her freedom for her parents' memory. The betrayal, the agony, and the necessity warred within her. The tears of rage, which she had successfully fought back during the confrontation, were now inevitable. You won't agree to this, right? Zuri pleaded with Jin-sok, her voice cracking. We are going to rip each other apart. You are too arrogant and wicked for my liking. Jin-suk advanced again, stepping over the spoiled decay of the desk, his expression hardening into a terrifying, possessive hunger. I agree, we are going to rip each other's throat. But the sight of blood turns me on, Zuri. The realization was final. She had no choice. She had become the property of Seoul's most dangerous man to reclaim the only thing she had left. The ceremony occurred 3 days later in a private venue overlooking the ocean, far removed from the city's scrutiny. There were no flowers, no music, and absolutely no joy. Only selected witnesses, mostly armed guards, and Madame Lee as the efficient, unsmiling officiant. Zuri wore a simple ivory dress, a painful counterpoint to her internal turmoil. Despite the lack of fanfare, her chocolate skin glowed effortlessly, highlighting her defiance. Jin-sok stood beside her, draped in a charcoal black suit, inscrutable. He didn't look at her during the ceremony, not once, treating her like an already owned artifact, an inconvenient necessity for his accession to power. When the official pronounced them married, waves crashed against the rocks outside, a brutal soundtrack filling the silence between them. He offered no kiss, no touch, nothing but cold distance. Their vehicle, a black, heavily tinted sedan, wound through the hills toward the Lee estate, an expansive, cold residence perched high above the harbor lights. Inside, cedar and oppressive wealth scented the air, making the home feel less like a residence and more like a mausoleum. A maid, instructed by Jin-sok, began to guide Zuri toward a guest room, but Jin-sok stopped her at the threshold. Grandmother's directive, you'll occupy the master suite. That's your room, Zuri stated immediately, crossing her arms. Ain't no way I'm sharing it with you. Good. He nodded once, his expression flat. The feeling is mutual. At least I won't have to worry about anyone jumping me in the middle of the night. He scoffed, knowing full well she was currently a stripper who had worked late nights to keep her cafe afloat. For both our safeties, the room is divided. I own half, you own the other half. Keep to your boundaries, don't snore, and everything will be fine. He led her into the enormous room, all slate and glass, where a symbolic battlefield had been prepared. An ornate, heavy partition dramatically divided the space. Your belongings are there, he gestured to one side. I'll arrange for anything additional you require. I require my properties returned to me, Zuri replied, her spine rigid. Jin-sok paused at the window, gazing over the city he owned. One matter at a time, little bride. He left her alone in the gilded cage. That night, sleep eluded Zuri. She listened to him pacing beyond the partition, the soft scrape of furniture, the repeated, jarring metallic click of a lighter that never ignited. Click, 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 over and over, like he was fighting himself. In the morning, she discovered the lighter and unopened cigarettes on the table. A note lay beneath the glass. You mentioned smoke corrupts the flavor of food. I'll attempt to quit. Zuri stared at the note. Why would a man who stripped her world bare, who married her for power, care about a casual opinion? The mystery of the ruthless Mafia boss deepened, leaving Zuri consumed by confusion. She was trapped, but she realized she might be trapped with a monster whose armor was starting to crack. The war had begun, not with a bullet, but with a piece of paper. Sleep was impossible. Zuri lay on her side of the vast, cold master suite, staring at the ornate partition that separated her from her husband. The note Jin-sok had left, I'll attempt to quit, was a tiny, infuriating crack in the monolithic armor of the ruthless Mafia boss. It didn't make him kind, it made him confusing. And confusion was dangerous. The wind howled outside, making the glass tower groan. Zuri finally heard what had kept her awake, the sound of Jin-sok pacing on his side of the room, restless, like a predator unable to find purchase. Then, the rhythm shattered. A sound like a glass hitting the floor, followed by a violent, choked gasp. It wasn't the sound of anger or a fight, it was something raw, broken. It was the sound of absolute, naked fear. Panic, sharp and unexpected, spiked Zuri's adrenaline. Why was she scared? Scared of losing him? The thought horrified her. She scrambled out of bed, adrenaline overriding logic and the explicit boundary set the night before. She crossed the invisible line, the forbidden territory, without hesitation. She found Jin-seok tangled in the silk sheets, sweating despite the cool air. His eyes were squeezed shut, his large, powerful body convulsing. He was muttering raggedly in Korean, words she couldn't quite catch, but the emotion was clear. Pure terror. He was trapped in a nightmare. Jin-seok, wake up! Zuri called, her voice urgent. She touched his shoulder gently. He jerked awake, his hand shooting out to grab her wrist with crushing force. His eyes were wide, wild, and utterly unfocused. He wasn't seeing her. He was seeing the monster in his sleep. It's me, Zuri. You're safe. You're home, she said, her voice calm and steady, fighting through the pain in her wrist. Recognition slowly dawned. The terror receded, replaced by immediate horror at his own action. He released her immediately, pulling back. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you, he apologized, the words foreign and almost physically painful for him to utter. Zuri rubbed her wrist, the mark already forming. It's okay. What were you dreaming about? He turned away from her, the armor sealing itself back into place. Nothing. That wasn't nothing. That was fear. The silence hung between them, thick and cold. Zuri didn't push. She sat on the edge of the bed, waiting. Finally, he whispered so quietly she almost missed it. My father used to lock me in dark rooms. He continued, his voice hollow. When I failed him, when I showed any weakness, sometimes for days, just darkness and silence, and the fear that I'd die there, alone. That's why you sleep with the lights on, Zuri realized, remembering the subtle glow she'd always seen beneath the partition. It wasn't habit, it was survival. He wanted to make me strong, feared, powerful. Jin-seok finished, gesturing at himself with disgust. He succeeded, but he also made me this man still trapped in the body of a scared little boy. Zuri did the only thing that mattered in that moment. She reached for his hand, weaving her fingers through his. You're not weak for having fears, Jin-seok. You're human. That's what makes you strong. He looked at her then, truly looked at her like she was light in his perpetual darkness. Don't go, he whispered, his voice cracking. I won't. Zuri lay down beside him, keeping his hand in hers, watching over the monster who was just a man, who was just a scared boy, who'd learned to survive by becoming terrifying. And somewhere in the darkness, the irreversible shift began. After the night terror, the atmosphere in the penthouse shifted. Jin-seok became subtly aware of Zuri, watching her cook, listening to her quiet humming, and leaving his lighter untouched as a silent gesture. But he still hadn't returned her parents' fixtures, the cold debt still hanging between them. Desperate for a moment of genuine, uncomplicated human connection, Zuri called an old university friend, Park Ji-yoon, sweet, reliable, and safe. They met at a small, unassuming cafe in Hongdae, the kind of place filled with students and soft background noise. Zuri laughed, a sound that felt foreign and light. Ji-yoon reached across the table, touching her hand gently. I heard you got married. Are you happy? He asked, sensing the sadness dripping from her tone. Zuri opened her mouth to answer, but the words stuck. Was she happy? She didn't know anymore. What she didn't see was the sleek black sedan parked across the street. Jin-seok sat perfectly still inside. He hadn't planned to follow her. He merely felt a sudden, inexplicable need to know her movements. But watching another man touch his wife, seeing Zuri offer that free, genuine smile, the one she never showed him was a visceral, agonizing violation. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight, his knuckles turned white. Minho, seated in the passenger seat, remained silent, knowing better than to speak. Find out everything about him, Jin-seok commanded, his voice lethal but terrifyingly calm. Boss, it looks innocent. He's just an old friend, Minho tried to persuade him. I don't care how it looks, Jin-seok hissed, the words precise as a knife cut. Find out where he works, where he lives, who he loves, everything. What are you planning to do to him, boss? Minho asked quietly. I'll make him disappear, Jin-seok muttered, still watching Zuri laugh. I'll make him understand what happens when you touch what's mine. That evening, Zuri returned to the mansion, humming softly under her breath. The lightness she felt was immediate proof that someone else had put joy back in her chest. Jin-seok waited in the vast living room. The lights were off. Only the city glow through the windows illuminated his silhouette, darkness pooling around him like it belonged there. He looked like the monster she feared, not the scared boy she'd comforted. She froze mid-step. "You scared me." "Good," Jin-seok muttered, not moving an inch. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" "Who was he?" Jin-seok demanded, turning his head slowly. His eyes caught the light, dark, empty, terrifying. "The man you were with? The one who touched you? The one who made you smile like that?" "I don't know what you're talking about. You had me followed?" Zuri stammered, backing toward the wall. "I was protecting what's mine," he answered simply, advancing toward her like a predator. "I'm not yours." She trembled, hitting the wall. He laughed, a hollow, cold sound. "Aren't you?" Jin-seok stopped inches from her. He planted one hand on the wall beside her head. "This marriage is just a contract," she argued, lifting her chin defiantly. "Is it?" Jin-seok leaned closer, his lips near her ear. "Let me be very clear about something. You belong to me now. Your smiles, your laughter, your time, your touch, all mine. If I see another man's hands on you again, I won't ask questions first. I'll bury him. Do you understand?" The following morning, Zuri was fueled by spite, anger, and a desperate need to reclaim the ground Jin-seok had stolen with his possessive threats. He had claimed her smiles, her touch, and her friends. She would prove he owned nothing. Out of sheer, stubborn pride, Zuri decided to visit his office, unannounced, uninvited. The receptionist tried to stop her. "Mrs. Lee, Mr. Lee is in a meeting," she said nervously. But Zuri pushed past her. She carried a lacquered lunchbox, a peace offering, or perhaps a declaration of war. She wasn't sure which anymore. She opened his office door without knocking, and her entire world tilted sideways. A woman stood beside his desk, stunning, sophisticated, her curves poured into a designer dress. Her hand rested possessively on Jin-seok's shoulder, her lips near his ear, whispering something that made the Black Fox smile, the calculated, dangerous smile that Zuri had never earned. This was Miss Choi, his secretary. Zuri's chest tightened, like someone had wrapped barbed wire around her ribs and pulled. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only see that woman's familiarity with her husband. She forced her face into a mask of indifference. "I apologize for interrupting," Zuri said coolly. Jin-seok looked up and smiled the smile of a predator 10 steps ahead. "Zuri Okoye, what a pleasant surprise." He didn't move away from Miss Choi. He didn't ask her to step back. He sat there, letting Zuri see, letting her feel, testing her. "I brought lunch, but I can see you're occupied," Zuri said, her voice tight. She turned to leave. "Miss Choi, that will be all," Jin-seok muttered. The secretary left slowly, deliberately, her hips swaying. She cast a smug, triumphant look at Zuri as she passed. When the door clicked shut, Jin-seok leaned back in his chair. "Are you upset?" he asked. "Why would I be upset?" Zuri defended. "Jealous, perhaps?" Jin-seok asked, standing, moving around the desk with predatory grace. "Absolutely not," Zuri snapped. "Liar," he said, stopping directly in front of her. "Now you know what it feels like." Zuri blinked, confused. "What feels like? To see someone you're married to looking at someone else, smiling at someone else, letting someone else touch them, like they matter." Understanding crashed over her like a wave. This wasn't coincidence. This was revenge for Ji-yoon, for yesterday. That was different. "Ji-yoon is just a friend," Zuri whispered. Jin-seok replied, stepping closer, backing her against the desk. "And Miss Choi is just my secretary. But it didn't feel that way when you walked in, did it?" "No," Zuri choked out. She felt like she was drowning. "I don't share, Zuri. Not my things, not my space, not my wife. And if you ever make me feel like that again, I'll make sure you regret it." He brought his hand up to cup her jaw, tilting her face up. She nodded, unable to speak. He released her and walked back to his desk, picking up the lunch she'd brought. He ate like nothing had happened. Zuri's heart was racing. She hated how much she wanted him to come back. 2 weeks after the office confrontation, an embossed invitation arrived at the mansion. The annual Seoul Business Summit. Black tie exclusive. Every power player in South Korea would attend. Madam Lee insisted they go together. "You'll show them unity. Show them the Lee family cannot be broken." The night of the event, Zuri stood before the mirror. She had chosen her dress carefully, deep emerald silk that hugged every curve, highlighting her African features. She looked stunning, and she knew it. When she descended the stairs, Jin-seok waited. Black suit, perfect hair, dangerous eyes. He looked up and forgot how to breathe. She was magnificent, powerful, his. "You look," he started, but the words died in his throat. Ready? Zuri asked, a small, challenging smile playing at her lips. He nodded, offered his arm. For the first time, she took it without hesitation. The venue was spectacular. The Grand Hyatt, crystal chandeliers casting light across marble floors. Power, money, and influence thickened the air. And when Zuri Okoye entered on Jin Sok's arm, the entire room noticed. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Is that his wife? She's quite striking, isn't she? Those African features, unusual choice for someone of his status. Zuri held her head high, shoulders back. She'd faced worse than whispers. Jin Sok felt her tense beside him. His hand moved to the small of her back, possessive, protective, claiming. Ignore them, he said quietly. They moved through the crowd. Business associates approached, offering congratulations that felt like interrogations. Then the media descended like vultures. Reporter 1 asked, Mr. Lee, is this marriage a love match or a strategic alliance? Reporter 3 asked boldly, Are you in love, or is this just bondage? Jin Sok handled them with practiced ease, deflecting and redirecting. But then he saw it. Across the room, Zuri was smiling bright and wide and genuine, the smile he had threatened to bury. She was smiling at another man, Kim Taeyang, heir to a shipping empire. The man touched her arm, said something that made her laugh. Jin Sok stopped hearing the reporters. He stopped seeing the cameras. He stopped thinking entirely. He was moving instantly, cutting through the crowd like a blade. He reached Zuri in seconds, grabbed her hand, and spun her toward him. She barely had time to gasp before his other hand came up to cradle the back of her neck, and he kissed her. It was deep, possessive, claiming, branding her in front of everyone. The cameras exploded. The crowd gasped collectively. His tongue swept into her mouth. She melted against him, her hands fisted in his jacket. When he finally pulled back, she was breathless, lips swollen, eyes glazed. What are you doing? Zuri whispered. Kissing my wife, he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Then he tucked her against his side, wrapping his arm around her waist like iron, and led her away from the chaos. He didn't care about the media. He just told the entire world who she belonged to. In the car ride home, Zuri asked, Why did you do that? I claimed you, he said, staring out the window. You embarrassed me. I claimed you. There is a difference, he responded, finally looking at her. She wouldn't admit that something so forbidden and dangerous could make her feel utterly alive. But her racing heart betrayed her truth. The days following the Seoul Business Summit were characterized by a tense, electric silence. Zuri moved through the mansion like a ghost, her swollen lips a constant, infuriating reminder of Jin Suk's violent claim. She expected punishment for her laughter, another cruel ultimatum, but all she received was his cold, focused distance. The public spectacle, however, had accomplished one thing. It had made their volatile marriage undeniable, even desirable, in the eyes of the city. One cold morning, Jin Sok interrupted her silent breakfast. Get dressed. We're going out, he commanded, his voice devoid of explanation. He didn't wait for her reply. Zuri complied, her mind racing with dread. Was this the final step in their documentation? Was he taking her to sign away her life forever? They drove across the city in the black sedan, the journey silent. Zuri stared at the passing buildings, bracing for whatever final humiliation he had prepared. The car stopped, not at a government building or another high-rise, but in a busy, unassuming commercial district. Jin Sok opened her door and merely pointed. Look! Zuri stepped out, shivering, and looked where he indicated. Her breath hitched. A building stood there, new and gleaming, its facade, modern glass and stone. Above the large front window, a sign hand-painted, familiar and restored read, Moonlight Brew Cafe. Her cafe. But transformed. It was double the size of the original space, expanded into the adjacent storefront. The windows were new, the paint fresh, and inside, Zuri could see her parents' beloved antique clock, meticulously restored, hanging proudly above a gleaming, state-of-the-art espresso machine. Tears streamed down her face, shocking in their intensity. This was the furniture she had traded her life for. It was all here, restored to its full glory, but housed in a space that was entirely new, entirely better. You did this, Zuri whispered, barely able to form the words. You said you wanted to rebuild, Jin Sok said, his eyes watching her reaction intently, a careful neutrality masking something deep. So rebuild. Bigger, better. Make it everything you dreamed. He had not just kept his promise, he had amplified it. He had honored her legacy and provided the resources to fulfill her parents' vision, the very vision he had deliberately annihilated. It was the most selfless, most complicated, and most terrifying act of affection he could have offered. Zuri turned to him, threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. The gratitude was overwhelming. "Thank you, she choked out, her insides wrenching with a mixture of excitement and profound confusion. He held her tight, his grip firm and possessive. "Don't thank me. Just be happy. That's all I want." In that moment, Zuri realized this was his twisted version of an apology, a proof of worth and acclaim. He had destroyed her to see her rage, and rebuilt her to earn her compliance. The debt was settled, but the war for her heart had just taken a devastating turn. The days following the cafe's restoration were a quiet, dangerous truce. Jin-sook started coming home earlier. He would find Zuri in the enormous, sterile kitchen, filling the space with the comforting aromas of sesame, ginger, and garlic, reminding him of a warmth he'd never known. He wouldn't speak. He would just watch, making himself available. The change was profound. Zuri found herself softening, touching his shoulder when she passed, laughing at his rare, dry jokes, cooking his favorite meals even before he asked. She saw the walls coming down, the armor cracking, the monster learning to feel. She realized with startling clarity that she was falling for him. One evening, Zuri was stirring a pot when Jin-sook came up behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist and rested his chin on her shoulder. "I missed you today," he murmured, his voice low and genuine. Zuri's breath hitched. "You saw me this morning," she whispered, keeping her voice light. "Change is nothing. I still missed you." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. She saw the scarred, complex man, the terrified boy, and the cold boss all contained in the dark intensity of his eyes. That night, after dinner and wine, after hours of conversation that skirted the edges of their secrets, he kissed her. It was different from the brutal claim at the summit. This kiss was tender, reverent, like she was something fragile and precious. She kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say, her confusion, her fear, her reluctant hope into the touch. When he pulled away, she didn't let him go far. "Don't stop," Zuri whispered, her voice husky. "Are you sure, Zuri?" Jin-sook asked, searching her eyes. His own face was tight, his hands trembling slightly. "I'm not gentle." She didn't answer with words. She nodded, heart pounding, pulling him back down. What followed was slow, careful. He moved them to his side of the suite, toward his bed, stripping away the clothes as if unwrapping a sacred gift. His hands trembled, confirming her belief that this was not merely physical for him. Then, he stopped. He had reached the point of no return, and the truth of the sacrifice she was making was suddenly revealed. He froze, his eyes widening in profound shock. He looked at her body, then back at her eyes, his expression shifting from desire to reverence to an overwhelming, crushing possessiveness. "Zuri, we should stop," he rasped, pulling back. I don't want to hurt you." "I don't want you to stop," Zuri insisted, pulling him closer. "I want this. I want you." So, he made love to her. He was careful, patient, whispering her name like a prayer. He moved with her, becoming part of her, conquering the last boundary between them. It was a terrifying, beautiful surrender. When it was over, they lay tangled together, hearts racing in sync. He held her like she was the most valuable thing in his world, his face buried in her hair. "You've ruined me completely," Jin-sook whispered into her hair, his voice broken. "Good. Now we're even," Zuri whispered back, realizing she had just completed the ultimate, final claim on the ruthless Mafia boss. Weeks passed in a haze of happiness Zuri never expected, blurring the memory of the rage and the contract. The cold mausoleum of the Lee estate finally started to feel like a home, simply because Jin-sook started acting like a partner, not a warden. He started coming home earlier, not for work or obligation, but for her. He would find her in the kitchen and just watch, making himself available. One day, Zuri found fresh peonies on the counter, her favorites. She'd never told him. When she asked, he shrugged, looking away from his phone, a rare, shy admission. Lucky guess. She knew it was a lie, suspecting her diary had been moved, confirming his effort to master the language of her heart. The intimacy of the new marriage spilled into the newly rebuilt Moonlight Brew Cafe. The grand opening was a massive success, and Jin-sook, Seoul's most feared man, showed up on opening day. He didn't just attend, He insisted on going behind the counter. He was dreadful. Minho stood beside him, looking utterly mortified. "Boss, you're supposed to froth the milk, not declare war on it," he hissed. Young women flocked in, giggling, posting photos on social media, ordering drinks just to be served by the infamous Black Fox. But his eyes kept finding Zuri across the room. Only her, always her. The media caught on quickly. Photos of the stern Mafia boss, awkwardly fumbling with a portafilter, went viral within hours. Headlines read, "Love knows no borders. Soul's power couple breaks barriers. LJ1 proves love changes everything. Interracial marriage done right." For once, the attention was beautiful, positive, and affirming. Zuri read the articles on her phone and smiled. Maybe they could make this work after all. Maybe love was enough to tame the monster. Jin-sok looked up from the counter and saw her reading the paper. He walked over, the powerful, dangerous air returning momentarily as he surveyed his handiwork, the happy cafe, the smiling wife, the positive headlines. "This is what you wanted," he murmured, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "Peace." "It's not peace," Zuri countered softly, leaning into him. "It's complicated happiness." He kissed her forehead, a possessive, tender seal. "Complicated happiness is the best I can give you." They settled into a routine. They were not a functional couple, they were an intensely volatile team. But in their unique, dangerous orbit, Zuri was finally feeling safe. She had conquered his father's trauma, she was his light, and she had reclaimed her legacy. They had a home, a business, and a dangerous, undeniable passion. But happiness, real happiness, never lasts long in their world. Not when the foundation of their love was built on a lie, a murder, and a debt older than their marriage. The calm was an illusion, designed only to maximize the shock of the crisis waiting in the final act. The sense of safety that had settled over Zuri and Jin-sok was, as always, an illusion. It was a Tuesday evening, a night reserved for their simple routine of sharing cheap ramen and watching old Korean dramas, a normalcy they had painstakingly built. Jin-sok came home early, but his face was pale, his posture grim, the casual, contented man of the last few weeks entirely gone. The Black Fox was back, but he was wounded. "We need to talk," he said, the words the four worst words in any language cutting through the domestic calm. Zuri's stomach dropped, the bottom falling out of her false safety net. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting down her chopsticks. He didn't answer with words. He handed her a thin, worn folder. The paper inside was old, official. Police reports, hospital records, and crime scene photos related to her parents' supposed accident 7 years ago. "I kept digging," Jin-sok said, his voice rough. "After you brought the rot to my office, I had my people run parallel reports on everything connected to your mother's estate. I didn't believe your parents were the kind of people to have a simple roadside accident." Zuri opened the documents. The words swam before her eyes, but the crime scene photos were brutally clear. Damage inconsistent with skid marks. Evidence of tampering. "It wasn't an accident," Jin-sok confirmed, sitting beside her, taking her hand. "Their car was tampered with, brakes deliberately cut. Someone wanted them dead." Zuri's world tilted violently on its axis. Everything she thought she knew, the grief, the struggle, the justification for her stepfather's ownership, was a foundation built on a lie. "Who?" Zuri whispered, barely able to form words. "Who would do that?" "I don't know yet. But it wasn't random. It was a methodical execution designed to look like a tragedy. Someone wanted them out of the way for what they owned, or perhaps what they knew." Jin-sok looked at her, his eyes filled with a raw mixture of love and guilt. He was the man who had destroyed her cafe, but now he was the only one with the resources to find the truth about her parents' murder. He was her villain, and now her sole protector. "I will find out who did this." "I promise you," he said, his hand tightening around hers. "This changes everything, Zuri. The war isn't against me anymore. It's against the people who destroyed your family and used me as a convenient bully to finish the job." The shock gave way to a cold, hard resolve in Zuri's eyes. The fire that had made Jin-sok claim her returned, but it was now weaponized by truth. As Zuri absorbed the terrifying weight of the conspiracy, another document, slicker and newer than the police reports, slipped from the folder and fluttered silently to the floor. She picked it up with shaking hands. It was a DNA test result, attached to a confidential file. The header was unmistakable, bearing the seals of the highest levels of the Lee Syndicate, a file Jin-sok himself hadn't realized was in the packet. Zuri stared at the bold letters, and what she saw stopped her heart from beating. The name confirmed an impossible, monumental, hidden family secret. The sound of the final document fluttering to the marble floor was the only noise in the massive room, louder than any gunshot. Zuri stared at the slick, official paper with the Lee Syndicate seal, her trembling hands already knowing the devastation it contained. She lowered her gaze from Jin-sok's terrified, guilty face and picked up the DNA test result. The complex medical jargon blurred, but the conclusion was stark, printed in bold Korean and undeniable English. Match. Paternity confirmed. Zuri looked at the names. The first was her father, Park Chul-soo. The second name made the world dissolve around her. It was not her stepfather's name, nor the name of a business rival. The second name was Lee Dong-wook, Jin-sok's biological father, and the former, ruthless head of the Lee Syndicate, the man Jin-sok himself loathed and feared. Zuri's mind scrambled for logic. Her father, the simple cafe owner, was related to Jin-sok's monster father? The implication was immediate and monstrous. Park Chul-soo was either Jin-sok's half-brother or a direct, powerful rival from the elder Lee's hidden life. She lifted her eyes, now utterly vacant of emotion, to Jin-sok. She didn't have to speak. He knew what she had seen. He had unknowingly handed her the final, most devastating piece of a puzzle that implicated his own bloodline in her tragedy. "What is this?" Zuri whispered, her voice a fragile sound that held no recognizable human inflection. Jin-sok had already seen the names. He walked toward her, slowly, desperately, as if approaching a bomb. "Zuri, I swear, I have never seen that file. My father kept secrets, layers of them. This means your father had a direct claim on the syndicate. He was a threat to my grandfather, or to my father himself." The murder of Zuri's parents wasn't just about the cafe or money. It was about succession, power, and blood. And the man who ordered the assassination, the man who engineered the car crash to look like an accident and then used corporate law to seize her inheritance, was a member of Jin-sok's family. Zuri retreated, pressing the back of her hand against her mouth. Not to stop a scream, but to prevent herself from tasting the rot of his entire world. The man she had fallen in love with, the monster she had comforted in the darkness, was a direct descendant of the conspiracy that destroyed her life. "You brought me here," Zuri said, the words heavy with betrayal. "You claimed me. You protected me, only to show me that your family killed mine." Jin-sok lunged forward, trying to grasp her hands, to explain, to beg. "I swear I didn't know. But listen, if your father was a legitimate threat, if he had a claim, then the people who killed him, my enemies, will come for you next. They will see you as the last link." Zuri pulled back, the horror finally giving way to a cold, terrible resolve. The love, the surrender, the passion, it was all tainted, twisted into a cruel joke by fate. She looked at him one final time, her eyes dry and terrifyingly clear. "The Black Fox came for me," Zuri stated. "The title no longer a moniker, but an accusation. And he brought me the proof that I am already dead." She turned and ran. Not for the door, but for the dark heart of the tower, leaving Jin-sok paralyzed, holding the secret that had destroyed his fragile happiness. Zuri has the DNA proof and knows the truth of the murder. Will she seek justice, destroying the man she loves, or will the syndicate find her first, finishing the job they started 7 years ago?